Europe's largest nuclear power plant has lost external power 15 times so far this year. Every time it happens, 6 nuclear reactors are just forced onto aging backup diesel generators. The kind of equipment failure that experts have been warning for years now could trigger the continent's next major nuclear disaster. That plant is called Zaporizhzhia in southern Ukraine. It sits in the middle of an active war zone right now, as I'm sure you know, and it's been that way for over 4 years. So the question everybody asks is simple, very unsettling. Could this actually be the next Chernobyl disaster? So welcome back to today's video, guys, and today we are exploring this question in its entirety. But to understand what makes this situation so alarming, it really helps us to remember what happened at Chernobyl in the very first place. So way back in 1986, a badly designed safety net at the Soviet nuclear plant in northern Ukraine went catastrophically, and I mean catastrophically wrong. A power surge combined with a fundamental design flaw in the reactor itself caused an explosion that then blew the roof off the reactor number 4 and released a plume of radioactive material across the entirety of Europe. And even today, it remains the worst civilian nuclear disaster in history, caused by a specific combination of human error and reactor design. Now, Zaporizhzhia's situation looks nothing really like that on the surface, but the underlying fear is a catastrophic radiological release from a nuclear facility in Ukraine is pretty much exactly the same now. Now, Zaporizhzhia isn't some minor facility at all. It's the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, with 6 separate reactors, and in March of 2022, just weeks into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it was captured by Russian forces, and it has remained under Russian occupation ever since. And while Ukraine technical staff continue operating it under the extraordinary pressure, according to analysts who are tracking this closely, the situation at the moment is genuinely unprecedented, because never before in history has an active nuclear power plant been sitting literally inside of a war zone, used at a time as a military position whilst remaining connected to civilian power grids that keep its reactors cool. And to track just how serious this is, the International Atomic Energy Agency created a framework in early war known as the 7 indispensable pillars of nuclear safety. And it covers things like the physical integrity of the plant, reliable off-site power, working backup systems, functioning cooling, radiation monitoring, emergency preparedness, and clear communication. As of the IAEA's most recent reporting, not one of those 7 pillars is actually being maintained to the standard that the agency actually requires. So every single safeguard that's supposed to prevent something terrible from happening isn't actually being followed and is being compromised. So the most immediate danger that comes from something like this is pretty scary. Power outages. Zaporizhzhia's reactors need a constant, reliable source of electricity to run their cooling generator systems. And at the moment, it's not really happening. And since the war began, the plant has lost its connection to the external power grid more than 24 times. With over half of these blackouts happening in this year of 2026, each time it happens, the plant switches to emergency diesel generators, the same kind of generators and systems that failed back in Fukushima in 2011. Now, Ukraine's state nuclear company has actually repeatedly warned that this switching is accelerating wear on the generators, and the last line of defense keeping those reactors cool if grid power isn't restored in time. Here's an important piece of nuance, though, that often does get lost in more coverage. Zaporizhzhia's 6 reactors have now actually been in what's called technical cold shutdown since 2024, meaning they aren't currently generating electricity or operating at full power. And that really does matter, because it makes a Chernobyl-style explosive meltdown significantly less likely than it would be at a fully operating reactor. But it does make the plant safe. Or does it? Because even shut down reactors and the spent nuclear fuel stored on site still generate heat, and they still require continuous cooling water to prevent damage. Now, the IAEA inspectors have specifically flagged growing concerns about maintaining that cooling water supply, especially during hot weather, when every single evaporation from the plant's cooling system increases. And so, really, in other words, the danger here isn't identical to Chernobyl. It's different, slower, but still very, very dangerous. And it's been allowed to accumulate largely unaddressed for many years. This isn't just a regional concern, because analysts really have pointed out that prevailing winds across southern Ukraine generally move westward and northwestward directly towards the European Union. And a major radiological release at Zaporizhzhia wouldn't stay actually contained inside Ukraine's borders, which is quite a concern, put it lightly. It's genuinely a consistent scale of concern across Europe, which is why the IAEA's directors have personally travelled to the region repeatedly and negotiated multiple temporary localised ceasefires, specifically to allow emergency repairs at the plant. Now, it's also really worth being honest about the complexities here, because both Russia and Ukraine have at different points accused each other of, well, specific strikes and attacks near the nuclear facility. And, well, independent verifications of exactly who is responsible for these different incidents isn't really that straightforward. What both sides do broadly agree on, however, is that continued fighting anywhere near that facility is a risk and inherently dangerous, no matter who is firing. So, could this be the next Chernobyl disaster? Well, the most accurate answer is all pretty much least saying maybe not in the near future or not in the same way, since a shutdown reactor behaves very differently than the operating reactor that exploded back in 1986. But the IAEA's own language on this has got increasingly more blunt. They've described the current situation as one that should have serious consequences, even while stopping short of declaring a technical formal emergency. So what's happening at Zaporizhzhia isn't a repeat of Chernobyl as of right now. It's something the world should be genuinely concerned about. But a major, and I mean major, nuclear facility trapped inside a combat active war with every layer of its safety system under sustained strain for years with no resolution in sight, that is a very, very, very difficult proposition right now, especially with Zaporizhzhia, Europe's largest nuclear plant sitting in the middle of an active war zone with pretty much no end date in sight, and every safeguard designed to prevent a disaster is under strain. This is very much a live, ongoing story, but an important one to explore. So if you are watching this sometime after we've filmed it, the situation may have already changed, hopefully for the better. But if you did find this video useful, make sure you do stay subscribed and stay tuned for the next video. And that is all for today.